Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your card-battling buddy cop hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we got you covered. Today it's time to duel. Was that appropriate?
It was a good enough approximation.
Thank you. I feel validated. As John will finally introduce you to one of the longest-running franchises in anime and beyond, Yu-Gi-Oh! Card battles in Colosseums, in VR, on motorcycles. We got it all, baby! And after that, we will journey to the melting pot that is the city of Santa Teresa, joining a police team of a human and an elf, I guess, to investigate a bunch of crimes, both magical and mundane in nature, in the series Copcraft. Sounds like an action-packed show to us, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Alright, so we haven't really talked about anything Yu-Gi-Oh! Before on the show. There's a little bit of a reason for that, I guess, because it's a very large franchise. The last opportunity we would have had was Arc 5 a couple of years ago.
Was that was the 5th series, right? Yes. No. Yes.
Duel Monsters GX 5D Zexal. Yes.
Well, not counting the very first one, I guess.
I guess technically 6. I don't think this discussion is going to talk about the original, but you know what? We'll touch on it, I guess.
Yeah.
This particular discussion kind of comes off the heels of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS, which ended not too long ago. At this point, it's maybe a few months. But I figure, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is something I've always had this weird fascination with because it's about a dumb card game, and for some reason, people's lives and the fates of worlds sort of hinge on this card game, and it should be dumb, and it is. But for some reason, it's always just sort of held this weird place in my heart. So I want to just, touch a little bit on the history of what I've seen and what I've liked and what I haven't liked.
Did you actually touch the card game?
A little bit.
Okay. Because I never did, so.
I have... Back when the games were released in physical form over here, they would always come with these promo cards, which were pretty cool. Actually, the latest one that just came out, Legacy of the Duelist, Link Evolution, they went back to doing that, which was cool. But beyond that, I have a few structure decks, a couple character decks. One of the guys I used to work with at a previous job had this awesome Judgment Dragon deck, the deck was basically search the deck for whatever card you want and pull it. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. And he was like, hey, you can have this deck. I was like, what, are you serious? I mean, all right, cool. But yeah, I mean, I haven't played the physical card game as much as I would like to, but the competitive scene for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, did you get a one-turn kill? No, stop playing. It is that. And from my experience playing the mobile game Duel Links, if you don't have your setup perfect after the first turn, then you just surrender, and it makes trying to play with people you don't know not very enjoyable.
I can imagine.
But yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh's roots come from a manga of the same name, as you might imagine, originally written by one Kazuki Takahashi. And people nowadays might be surprised to know that the original Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't supposed to always center around the card game. Takahashi kind of intended on Yugi and company sort of being skilled at multiple games of skill and chance. And the original manga and the 1998-99 anime, which is, it's rough. Oh boy. Sort of centers around that. and then they sort of introduced the card game, which back when it was first shown off was called Magic and Wizards.
Okay.
Takahashi kind of taking cues from Magic the Gathering back then.
Yeah, sure.
But
I mean, that was like the king of cards, so to speak.
and then after that, it just kind of took on a life of its own. In the year 2000 came Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, which was kind of like a soft reboot that focused a bit, a lot more on the card game. Takahashi even pivoted the manga also into another reboot called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist. And that's probably where a lot of people, myself included, got their start and became most familiar with it.
Yeah, me definitely too. Like I watched like 1 or 2 episodes of the original anime just because I was interested in the roots after watching Duel Monsters. And that seems to be like much more violent and, I don't know, disturbing thing than Duel Monsters was. Like, yeah.
If you take the wrong card, you'll fall off the roof into the water below. Oh, don't move your hand, or the lighter sitting on the heel of your hand will fall onto the alcohol that I'm spilling onto your body. Okay.
Yeah, death games all around. But yeah, I was also like introduced to this franchise through Duel Monsters, the second season, I guess, or the reboot, whatever you want to call it.
It's sort of odd to think about it as a reboot when that's the one that a lot of people in the West got to know the best. Because I mean, don't expect that original to ever get licensed any time in your life.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people probably got familiar with it via the 4Kids dub.
Mm-hmm.
4Kids kind of doesn't exist anymore due to a series of bad decisions. I guess they sort of exist spiritually as a company called 4K Media. I think they sort of pivoted towards toys and whatnot, but there are still some companies that kind of try and take up their mantle and have attempted to dub the series after that. It's kind of weird because they sort of start dubbing it pretty late in the game. And by the time they do, the next series has started. Well, I guess we won't finish dubbing this and we'll just move on to the next thing. And that happened several times.
Didn't happen for Yu-Gi-Oh! Though, right?
No, they actually saw that one through to the end.
Yeah. I mean, it was a super hit for them, so...
Oh, yeah. That in like Pokemon and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Not One Piece, though. Oh, thankfully.
Oh, God. Yayo. But yeah, it makes me really sad because at one point they went back and they started to redub Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters with a more faithful translation, the original music, unedited card art. And they were starting to release it on DVD along with the Japanese language version as well, which was cool.
And they only got 8 episodes or something out?
They got 9 episodes in. They released 3 DVDs, and they were like, this is too much effort.
Yeah, too much effort. Probably didn't sell nearly as well as,
Yeah, only for the nuts like me who wanted to see the original were buying it. So
I was interested in that. I mean, I didn't have really access to the DVDs back then because I would have had to import them. So I watched fan subs of those, but those were fun. And I was like, hey, I finally get to see the original version of the series, and then womp womp. The only other kind of thing that was available that was the original version were some bad Hong Kong subs.
Oh, God.
Hong Kong subs and rips of the original show with some really bad translation. I remember Seto Kaiba being translated as Mr. Turtle House or something, which, it's a thing. Those kind of subs kind of don't exist anymore, I guess.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, but fun times. But yeah, I never saw much of the original version of the series besides those like first 8, 9, or 10 episodes.
But yeah, I got interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I watched a lot of the 4Kids dub, people getting sent to the Shadow Realm and all. But I remember when I was in college, the first time, So that would have been, I discovered this in 2003, 2004. This was when the series was still airing in Japan. Back in the dark ages of subbed anime, when you had to, really hunt around for it and hope that people were actually interested enough in translating and putting out downloads for it. On the website Tokyo Tosho.
Oh boy, here we go.
On the website Tokyo Tosho, I remember one day happening upon a raw TV rip episode. I think it was episode 170. It was later in the series. It was during the infamous Orichalcos arc that nobody but me likes. And it was an episode where Joey Jonochi is dueling against this guy Valen and his deck of armored monsters that he equips to his body. And I was like, well, and I started watching. I was like, wow, this is nothing like the dub. The voice acting is better. The music is way better. And it's just it felt like an entirely different show because it fucking was.
Yeah. For the 4Kids version, they obviously made a lot of edits to make the show more kid-friendly, or in their eyes anyway. Apparently that was something that was necessary. They took out all the guns. I remember that infamous scene where Bandit Keith holds his finger against Maximilian's head when in the original he is holding a gun. Fucking dumbass bullshit.
There's a scene where a couple of Pegasus's cronies burst into Kaiba's office and Pegasus wants you to come with us, and they're just pointing and it's like, oh boy, oh, you're not fooling anyone, guys. And then Kaiba kicks his desk at them and he jumps out the window, but the way they're holding their hands, it looks like they should be holding something, but they're not, and it just doesn't look right. And it's like, guys.
Yeah. And the Shadow Realm thing wasn't in the original version either, right? That was made up for...
Oh yeah.
Okay, so...
yeah,
what was the Shadow Realm? That's something where you can get banned to if you lose a duel, or let's say if people die in the original, in the US version, they were just, I don't know, sent to the Shadow Realm or something.
It was the equivalent from the Ocean Group dub of Dragon Ball Z, where you'd get sent to the next dimension.
Oh, good lord. I think they did the same thing in Saber Rider. It's when the Outriders were just killed, shot dead, and it's they're being sent back to their dimension. No, they're fucking dead.
It's like a scene where Nappa is shooting down fighter jets, and it's Tien says something don't worry, I can see their parachutes. No, you can't! Or he blows up a whole bunch of office buildings. Don't worry, they're empty because it's Sunday.
I never heard that before. That's amazing.
Oh no, I remember that distinctly and being like, are you fucking for real? Are you serious?
It's super weird because of course I watched the German dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the thing with anime for us was we got some of the stuff directly from Japan, and we got some of the stuff from you guys. So sometimes you got the original version, which was faithfully dubbed, and not much change in there from from our end of from German media and stuff. And then we sometimes got stuff from America where all that shit was changed super hard. And it was okay, okay, you can always tell. You can always tell when 4Kids had their hands on this shit. So yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was one of those shows where it's this this feels like someone has been meddling.
In order to keep from repeating myself too much, and we sort of touch on the other shows.
Yeah.
Big constants in the dub changes are the music, character names, the card art, because you can't have Japanese text in there because that's not American.
Obviously.
So they would change it to zoom in on the card art and just zoom in on the attack and defense values, and it looked weird and just not right.
Yeah.
They would also almost always change the one of the big things, if you're not familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! From Duel Monsters On, is that there would be pop-ups on the screen regarding like monsters' attack and defense strengths, the player's life points, that sort of thing. They would always change how those look. Um, in the dub for Duel Monsters, it was just like this weird blue and yellow, ugly sunburst looking thing with these puke yellow numbers.
Yeah.
Whereas in the original, it was like this brushed metal. It was like this cool brushed metal design with like bronze numbers, and the style on it kind of varied depending on probably who was directed the animation for that episode. But sometimes it would like look like the numbers were like on a tumbler. You would see them actually spinning when the values changed, which was really cool. So they had each series had its own unique design for that sort of thing and its own unique sort of set of sound effects for it as well, which was really neat. And as far as each series has gone, that's sort of one of the interesting things I like looking at is like that visual design. How are they going to represent it in this series? And that's something I like seeing.
Yeah. We haven't even touched on really yet how that show or that season, or let's say the whole franchise, is structured starting from Duel Monsters onwards. We assume most of our listeners have some kind of familiarity with Yu-Gi-Oh! And how that works. But yeah, it's basically a bunch of, card battles, like Magic the Gathering, only done with, let's say, the help in the visual department with VR or hologram science fiction shit, where all the monsters basically come to life before your eyes, and it gets more and more evolved, where like
that's the cool part, though.
Yeah, that's the best part. Like, that's the thing that drew me in too. Like, hey, here's a bunch of cool monsters, and they actually fight each other. And I was super disappointed when I, played one of the games, and it was just the cards appearing on the screen. It's like, where are the fucking monsters?
Yeah, I mean, in some games, they kind of went the extra mile. Like, there were games on the PSP called Tag Force. And with certain monsters, they were like, yeah, here's some extra little bits of animation. And sometimes you get, like, the character jumping out to say something. It's like, that's cool. That's what I want. But, to do that for every single thing, it's not plausible.
No, it's not. But, yeah, that's always the thing that got me into the series. And I like that it got more quote-unquote realistic. Like, with the first, they have like these normal battle stadiums, I guess, where it's like a fixed plane, and then later in Duel Monsters, they get these mobile hologram devices that basically let you fight it out everywhere you want in the city, which was probably my favorite arc of the show, where it's like
Dual discs are just the fucking coolest shit.
The way they transform and like extend and shit like that, and you can have a fight in a fucking alleyway, on the top of a skyscraper, or I don't know, anywhere you want, on a boat, on a fucking Zeppelin airship. It's crazy shit. And then it's some weird fantasy, crazy Egyptian god shit also gets thrown into the mix later, and that was all pretty out there. Pretty weird, but also pretty good. And add to that one of the guy with the weirdest anime haircuts in history.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, I mean, it's kind of all the protagonists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Honestly, I guess it's like.
I mean, it's on a sliding scale.
Yeah, I guess. What was his name in GX? Is probably the most.
Judai.
He's probably the most down to earth in terms of hairdo.
Yeah, I mean, his hair is just, a big brown mop. He looks like your average teenager.
Yeah.
And then you get some of the other characters. It's like, all right, okay, sure.
But yeah, I guess what was your favorite part of Duel Monsters before we get to the other seasons of the show? Like, what maybe favorite character, maybe, I don't know, favorite story arc?
I mean, if you're going to talk about favorite character in Duel Monsters, it's hard to not pick Kaiba.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, Kaiba, he starts off really rough around the edges. He's kind of an asshole.
He kind of stays an asshole, but But
he sort of starts to come around for the other characters. I feel like, even though he won't outwardly say so. I mean, in the dub, he sort of stays outwardly an asshole, but in the Japanese one, he doesn't really soften, but he's like, yeah, all right, fine, I guess I'll help you guys out, sort of deal.
Mm.
But he's I guess he's the fucking male power fantasy because he has a lot of money. He owns his own company. He just wants to play games and just flaunt how fucking good he is at it.
And
But
he has a sick ass outfit later in the series.
yeah, so he has that dope ass white trench coat. It's like,
Yeah.
I want that shit.
would look stupid on any normal human, but he can wear it. It's
And
great.
he has an unnaturally weird fetish for dragons.
Yeah, what's up with that? Playing too much Fire Emblem.
I mean, Kaiba is all about building his deck around the Blue Eyes White Dragon. So much so that if you're not familiar, early on in the series, he buys. There are 4 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon in the world. He buys the 4th one off of Yugi's grandpa and then tears it in half just because fuck you. Now I own the only Blue Eyes in the world.
Yeah, and then Yu-Gi-Oh! Fucking breaks his mind. Yugi. Yeah, that's well, that show got weird sometimes. Like
A little bit.
the thing is, I somehow I think I never actually watched that show all the way through. I don't think I saw the final arc. I think I stopped after that. I don't know. Was it set within Atlantis or something like that? That filler arc.
That was part of the Orichalcos arc.
Orichalcos, yes. I think I never saw the final Egypt arc, where it all comes down to the history of the pharaoh that inhabits Yugi's body. Yami Yugi, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little weird of a story, but I felt like, it sort of was an interesting divergence from, hey, this is all about cards, but actually the cards have basis in Egyptian magic and whatnot, and it was kind of strange, but it was also sort of neat the way they tried to tie that into it being like, oh yeah, this is actually has some weird mythos behind it. And I was like, all right, dude, sure. Pegasus pulled the card designs from, ancient Egyptian magic. Yeah, it's weird, but there's just something about it that just grabbed me tight and held me toward the end, especially the big final duel between Yugi and the Pharaoh that'll determine whether or not the Pharaoh will, his spirit will be able to return to his time. And it's just like big, long, knockdown, drag-out fight over the course of like 4 or 5 episodes.
I mean, the battles were always pretty damn long in this show.
Yeah, in this series in particular.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the finales of Battle City, like that was an entire, I don't know, 26 episode arc or something where they are just fighting on that battleship and the tower, and like those duels go like, each of the duels, even the minor ones, go like 3 or 4 episodes or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of learned from that moving forward because even starting with the very first duel in GX, you sort of see, oh, things move at a much more brisk pace now.
Definitely more snappy. Definitely.
And
yeah.
That also sort of influenced the length of this, the overall length of the series moving on as well, because they sort of started to get shorter. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters clocked in at about 220-ish episodes.
Oh,
yeah.
Lord.
It ran over 4 years, almost 5 years. So that's a decent length of time for your card battle action anime. But
yeah, no kidding. And this showed like it didn't. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Duel Monsters, but I always felt like the animation quality, while not like superb or anything, stayed on a pretty consistent level. And it was always fun to look at because of all the crazy designs and everything and all the shit happened, even with the weird effects work that got put in there by 4Kids that wasn't in there before. But like cool character designs, like really crazy bullshit, and I don't know, the monsters actually, killing the other monsters. Most of that stuff just looked cool from beginning to end. Just some of the filler arcs were just not interesting. But
I mean, one of the cool things about this series that sort of changed as we went on, was that a lot of the characters' decks are sort of built around one or two cards that, even if they're not a part of the same set, they sort of like work together in a way so that it becomes like a cohesive deck. Kind of. I mean, they're probably not decks you would ever use in actual competitive play, but you could still you could put them together probably the way they do and use them to play against friends or whatever, unless you're a mutual friend of ours and you stack your deck with 3 copies of, I think the card was Solemn Wishes, where every time you draw a card you regain 500 life points and it stacks 3 times.
Great tactic.
But I mean, I found thanks to GX, I found a way to undo that, because there is a monster called Nurse Reficule the Fallen one that turns all healing effects into damage effects. Fuck you.
But I also remember, like, I mean, that's probably also what you meant, but I remember each deck also having, like, also being themed kind of in the show. At least in the beginning, there was a guy with a bug deck. There was a guy that only used like certain type of animal monsters. I think was it May who only used the harp or used the harpies as her signature monsters. Yugi used the dark magician and the dark girl magician.
I guess you could say decks were built around types like Weevils was Bug, Yugi's, I guess you could say, is Spellcasters. Yeah, but I guess, but
Joey
later
was
on,
Sword Fighters or something.
Yeah, I think, what would that be called? Warrior. That's a warrior type. Yeah, but starting in GX, decks start to circle around archetypes as opposed to types like warrior, spellcaster, dragon, etc., whatnot. But yeah, and we'll
also sometimes that's one of the things I remember that is probably for kids dubs specific in GX. Sometimes a card deck can be assembled around the theme of hot sauce, which I assume was sake in the in the original version. I don't know the character's name, the one that looks a bit like a koala.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and in the original, I assume he was to inherit the sake business of his family, and in in the US version, it's the hot sauce business, and all his monsters can get super high on hot sauce, while in the original, I assume they just get drunk, and it was super obvious, and it made me laugh a lot.
Yeah, oh jeez, I forgot that. Holy shit. But yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters definitely set the precedent for everything that was to come after it, for damn sure. And, it's basically, where I got most interested in this stupid franchise about a children's card game. And it helped launch the career of one little Karibo. So... If you want to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, you can do that as well, because through all of the dumb jokes he makes, he still retains the overarching plot lines pretty well.
The same with Dragon Ball Abridged, right? I mean, and Final Fantasy VII Machine Abridged, like those groups kind of starting out with only being the more jokey joke and, meme humor and everything. And then apparently they all went to actually trying to make a sometimes even better version of the show. I
would argue that Dragon Ball Z Abridged is the Kai that we need.
Yes, it definitely is. Like, not from the get-go. It was very jokey joke in the beginning. Like, it's like, hey, let's throw joke into everything and change a lot of stuff. But then later they were just... why not just do a better version of the show? And they did. And it's like, arguably the moment they made a better new version of that moment from the Cell games, where Gohan reaches his second Saiyan form than Kai did, with the original music and everything. Yeah. So here's to the abridged versions on YouTube, because it's a bunch of good stuff. I at least recommend the Dragon Ball one and the Final Fantasy VII one, which is still running, but I have never seen the Yu-Gi-Oh one, only bits and pieces.
Yu-Gi-Oh one started off, pretty. I guess you could describe it as low budget as well, but the later episodes got really good, and at one point, little Karibo Martin, he pointed out someone was like, "What do you mean it's a bridge? This episode's like 15 minutes long." And he's like, "Dude, I crammed like 5 episodes worth of stuff in here. I'd call that a bridge." And I'm like,
Yes,
"Yeah,
definitely." People tend to forget how many fucking episodes this show has.
Like, and I mean, speaking of abridging stuff, some of the Yu-Gi-Oh dubs, they would just cut out episodes entirely because,
Yeah, well,
so, if you wanted your full series run, you have to watch the original pretty much, which, thankfully, before we go on, you can watch pretty much every series in its entire original form on Crunchyroll, with the exception of Zexal, because they only have the dub of that for some reason, and I don't think they even have the full series, which is weird. Parts of the dubs are available on Crunchyroll in the US as well, which is cool. So, you can watch it mostly how you want. I mean, I'm obviously going to have a slant towards the original Japanese version, but that's just me. But yeah, I guess we can move on and touch a little bit on some of the other series, because after Duel Monsters came Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters GX, as was the full title, and it centers around the character Judai Yuki, whose name, if you literally translate it, means courageous youth. Good job, Japan. And his struggles getting into the prestigious Kaiba Corp Duel Academia. This was the point where they sort of started to be like, oh, each character's deck is themed after a different archetype. Like Judai's deck is elemental heroes, because he loves comic book heroes, and everything in his deck is like a elemental hero, Featherman, Burst Lady, Clayman.
Cool.
It's cool. It's cool. And a lot of that circles around fusing monsters together in order to create new ones, and them having like wild effects, like Flay Wingman. When it destroys an opponent's monster, the opponent also takes damage equal to the destroyed monster's attack strength. Like, it's the win button, basically.
Was one of his final hero monsters some weird space dolphin?
All right. So later on in the series, Judai gets this one elemental hero called Neos, and that Neos ties into another archetype called Neospatians, and one of the Neospatians was a dolphin. And there were other creatures as well. Please don't ask me to name them all, because I can't remember them. And Neos's big mechanic was that he would do contact fusion. While other monsters are in play, he could fuse with them and then create a new version Neos with different abilities and whatnot, which was, at least visually interesting, and it endowed Neos with new abilities. So I will not take away from GX that the monster design and the variety in the archetypes is cool. I thought, each character sort of had their own deal, and it sort of tied into their character as well. Like, the overarching plot in GX for like the first half of the series is non-existent.
It's basically just, now Yu-Gi-Oh! Now we battle at high school. It's like now ultimate sports anime trope thing where they they battle at high school for dominance, whatever, and have like tournaments and shit like that. And it's, compared to what Duel Monsters does from the very beginning, GX felt pretty grounded, like for the first half or something. And then shit just gets super crazy
weird
from one episode to another, it's suddenly now we have demons and now we have fucking aliens. And it's like, what? What's happening here?
At one point, Dual Academia, like the entire structure and all of the people in it get transported to another world where, the monsters are real and whatnot. There's this dude that Judai duels with who tries to like mind control the entire academy named Sayo. His deck is based off of the Major Arcana. Fun thing, Sayo is voiced by one Takahito Koyasu, and his Ace Monsters deck is Arcana Force the World.
Very good.
It was an interesting precursor to when the current JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was a fucking star in the sky that nobody saw coming.
Yeah.
But it was, looking back on it, it's interesting to see.
I didn't know that. That's a funny tidbit.
Yeah.
Was there even any connection to original Duel Monsters? Yu-Gi-Oh! Appeared in GX at some point, didn't he?
Yes, in the very first episode, Judai is rushing to get to his entrance exam, and he bumps into, he's just some guy on the street, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry I bumped into you," and this guy turns to him and says, "Hey, this is my lucky card. I think you should take it. It'll do you good." And it's this card, Winged Karibo. And you don't see his face, but you hear his voice. And it's like, it's Yugi. Shut up. Yeah. It's Yugi.
Is GX the only series that does that? I think all the other ones are kind of standalone, right?
We'll get to that, actually.
Okay.
So Judai sort of just takes this card from Yugi, and it saves him a few times because it's basically the normal Karibo card, but with wings. Sure, send it to the graveyard. Take no damage from an attack. All right. I mean, there is a point later on where, in this museum, if there's an exhibit with the famous Yugi Muto's deck, and there's some guy who's like this copycat duelist who takes it and does his best to impersonate Yugi and be like, "Haha, I'm the king of games now."
Mm-hmm.
And GX does some weird shit, but I won't let anyone say it's not fun. So
yeah,
I mean, there is an episode where they're in like a hot springs and they end up dueling against the spirit of Kaiba Man and his deck, and it's literally just Kaiba, but Kaiba Man is also a card that exists in the TCG.
Okay.
Like, God, what was it effect? Tribute this card, special summon one Blue Eyes White Dragon from your hand. Because, of course, it's just the card art is just Kaiba with a Blue Eyes helmet with a long red wig. You're not fooling anyone. We know who you are. GX is goofy, but it does have some really fun moments in there. Like, in particular, two of my favorite moments are one of the characters, Ryo, is about to graduate. And when you graduate, you're supposed to have, like when you graduate from Duel Academia, you're supposed to have like a big graduation duel and you select who you want to fight against. And he chooses Judai. Now, Ryo is known by a lot of the students as Kaiser because he's like the toughest guy in the school. And up to that point, here's an interesting thing about Judai is we see him lose several times over the course of the show. Which is, in a lot of the other series, I think we see Yugi lose 2-3 times maybe over the course of over 200 episodes. And in a lot of the other series, the main character does not lose often. So we see Judai lose several times, and it sort of goes towards building his character, which I think was, a really neat choice. So Ryo challenges him to a duel, and he's like, "Listen, I want to duel you. But this time, you're going to have to fucking come correct and make this a good fight." So Judai's like, all right, okay. But he sort of changes his strategies and almost ends up changing his personality. And Ryo's like, "Yo, bro, I wanted to duel you at your best, not you trying to be my best so you can beat me." And Judai's like, Man, you know what? You're right. Okay. And he has this like turnaround moment where he goes back to using his own strategies that he knows works and just winning by a hair at the end. And it's actually pretty exciting and fun to see. So that's pretty neat. And then there's another character, Jun Manjome, who is like he's like Kaiba light, for lack of a better word. His brothers own the Manjome Zaibatsu, which is like this big, conglomerate of like tech stuff. And at one point, one of his brothers is like, "Listen, June, we're about to take over Duel Academia and make it our own." And June's like, June, even though he's kind of an ass, is like, "Yo, that's not cool. Don't do that. So I'm gonna fight you. If I win, you have to, not do that thing." And his brother's like, "All right, okay, I'll duel you. You got to fight me at a handicap, though. All of your monsters got to have 500 or less attack strength." And June's like, "All right, I'll see your challenge." And on the day of the duel, he says, "Listen, bro, I know you said all of my monsters are supposed to have 500 or less attack strength, but every monster in my deck has 0 attack strength." And everyone watching is like, "Buh?"
Okay.
And using this 0 attack strength deck, he just fucking mops the floor with his brother, whose deck is stacked with like these parallel rare cards, which in real life are like some of the rarest shit that actually exist. Like to the point that when he summons them, they have the actual hollow foil glow on them. And it's just, it's another neat moment where he's like, he has this moment of redemption. He's like, yeah, even though I think I'm the coolest, the hottest shit, maybe don't do this to this school, because there's this is the place where I've gone and I've met a lot of neat people, and just don't do that. So GX, if nothing else, has a lot of neat character building moments that sort of go all throughout, and also, I feel like tie in with how the characters' decks change and get built. So I feel like GX overall is not nearly as good as the original, but it has elements in there that I think help tie it together a little more tightly. This was also the first series where one of like this big composer from Sega would step in, Yutaka Minobe, and his music was fucking fire throughout the whole series. Like GX is a really good score, man. Even if you don't watch it, look up the sound duels and listen to that music, because it's good stuff. I don't know what else. Do you have
I'm
anything else
only
to say about
familiar.
GX?
No, well, I'm only familiar with the US soundtrack, sadly.
That's unfortunate. But
But
yeah,
but yeah, GX was the last season of Yu-Gi-Oh! I watched, which I enjoyed. I watched all of that, even in its edited form. It was fun. I liked the characters and I liked the super wacky story. But
even
yeah,
even with its weird ending where Judai should lose to Yugi, but we don't strictly know the outcome of the duel, but the numbers would dictate that his attack would put him on the losing end.
yeah.
It's weird.
But yeah, just like the deck of its main character, it's a lot more cartoony than Duel Monsters was, and I guess I liked the more epic tone of later seasons of Duel Monsters more than I like this. But yeah, I still also like GX.
Okay. So after GX came Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and this was the start of the dumb meme about card games on motorcycles.
Yes. What do you mean dumb?
You're right, you're right. But yeah, the whole card games on motorcycles thing, it sounds weird until you see it in action, and I was like, oh, you know what? It's actually kind of cool, and I like it.
It's goofy as fuck, but it's also cool.
Yeah, so the story centers around this guy, Yusei, and he lives in the slums of Neo Domino City. The slums are called Satellite. And he basically happens into this whole thing where there's this like big conspiracy to do away with Satellite, and the public safety is going around trying to round people up, and playing card games is, not allowed. But Yusei gets pulled over by this police officer, Ushio. And here's an interesting tidbit for you. In the very first series, the 1998 series, one of the first people that Yugi has a competition with is a guy named Ushio who looks vaguely similar to the one in 5Ds.
Ah,
So they sort
loose
of reached
connection.
they sort of reached back and were like, maybe it's not the same character, but maybe it is. Who knows? Um, and Yusei says to Ushio, "Listen, if you duel me, if you win, you can arrest me." And Ushio says, "All right, I agree to that." And he dismisses the other officers that are there. And Yusei says something along the lines of, "I think you're a good person." Well, why is that? Because you actually want to fight me in this card game instead of just taking me in. And Ushio's like, "Shut up, you stupid kid." and and this is, where they establish what riding duels are. This field spell called Speed World. Speed counters become a big mechanic that tie into a new type of card called Speed Spells. Um, they tried to work it into the main game, but it's kind of hard to
Then the
actually play.
police got involved and said it was too dangerous to actually play card games on your motorcycle, and then got banned. And
Yeah, I know. What a downer, right?
yeah, nobody saw this coming. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, 5Ds I feel like was a little more mature in comparison because you say he's just trying, obviously he's trying to reunite with his former friend Jack Atlas, who at this point is like the king of the riding duel circuit. And he at one point gets actually arrested, and anyone who gets arrested gets like this tattoo put on them called a marker. So he has this like weird yellow tattoo on his face for the rest of the series run to know, so that people know, yeah, this dude was in the slammer for a spell, uh, which which leads to like this really cool jailbreak sequence, and it's fucking crazy. The title 5Ds deals with the five dragons that all the main characters have. I guess it's interesting because each dragon has its own different like types that it ties into. There's like Stardust Dragon, Red Demon's Dragon, excuse me, Archfiend Dragon, sorry.
Hmm.
Black Rose Dragon, and like very visually interesting designs for the dragons. They feel very unique from one to the other, which is cool. This sort of starts off with this Fortune Cup thing where Yusei wants to face off against Jack in order to, help stop public security from running rampant and just throwing people in jail because stop playing card games, stop riding around on your bikes. You're not allowed to have fun. This is a future dystopian setting.
Yeah.
Blah.
It's 5Ds always. I mean, I only saw like 2 episodes of it or something. But what I saw in terms of promo always looked like, hey, here's the dark cyberpunk version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Enjoy. So
Yeah, and I mean, it turns out that Jack was just being used by some promoters to push their agenda because he kind of turns around on everything he does and helps Yusei and the others fight these evil people called the Dark Signers, who summon up basically their decks are built around these monsters that are based off of the Nazca lines in South America, which
okay.
yeah, which is a wild mythos to pull from. But
I mean, some other media did that. I remember that being also in the Enix RPG Illusion of Gaia. So one of the stages, one of that you have to work your way through, is like above the sky of that mural. So yeah,
I
that's
forgot that. It's true.
Yeah, that's always like when you see like these weird things in the world that yeah, that always gets like picked up for stuff like this. So that's interesting.
But yeah, there's this big fight with the Dark Signers. Some of them are riding duels, some of them are not. Like, there's a couple of younger characters, Rua and Ruka, who, are too young to drive a motorcycle. So, what do? You're gonna have to have your stationary duels like a friggin' pleb. But whatever. But
Disgusting.
whatever. This also introduces well, they're kind of introduced before this, but it also introduces two of the other characters, Aki and Crow. Aki is cool because she's like this has this like psychic power, but she has to like keep it in check with this like hair ornament she wears. And one of the dudes that like was kind of taking care of her prior to that was a real piece of shit and was trying to use her psychic powers to his own end. He just turned out to be a massive scumbag. And then there's Crow. He exists. I Crow is they try so hard to make him like this interesting main character, and he's completely ineffectual and just not cool. He's like, oh, I have this black feather deck that's blah 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 blah. All right, dude, sure. I just a friend of mine or a mutual friend of ours, excuse me, was like, yeah, Crow's a piece of shit, and I was like, I don't know, man. Disclosure, I never actually finished 5Ds, so
Is that the only series you didn't finish?
no, it's not.
Oh right.
We'll talk about that. But 5Ds back in the dark ages of anime when stuff wasn't actually licensed, had to find fan subs for it. So I watched 5Ds and fan subs for God, close to a year. Then I just kind of fell off it because trying to hunt down the fan subs was a real crapshoot for a while. And when I went back to start watching it again recently, I was like, oh yeah, no, he was right. Crow is kind of an annoying piece of shit.
Well, okay.
But yeah, all of that consumes about the first 60, 65 episodes, and it's pretty cool. It's fun to watch. I started watching the second half, quote unquote, because the second half is kind of longer than the first half, if that makes any sense. I know it doesn't, but I'm not gonna lie to you listening. I don't know much about what happens in the latter half of the show, and I don't want to speak on it to be super uninformed. But from what I watched of 5Ds, it's cool. I want to sit down and actually finish watching it at some point, which honestly I wanted to do before we started talking about it today, but I just didn't have a chance to. So I'm sorry about that, everyone.
That's not a problem.
But someday I will.
You did enough of legwork for this particular review. I mean, it's a bunch of series to cover, so don't pressure yourself.
So, and speaking of going back again to music, this was the second series that Yutaka Minobe scored, and it also has really dope music, like a lot of more synth and electric music in there, and it really matches with the aesthetic of the show really well. There's one track in there called just Speed World that I would encourage you to listen to because it sets the tone for the first duel in the show very well, I would say. And it's who knew that card games on motorcycles of all things would be would be an interesting thing to watch. So I think
I could have told you.
That's true. That's true.
Just for the concept alone, I mean.
But yeah, it's 5Ds is neat. Someday I'll actually finish watching it, and yeah, it's good stuff. Oh, before we move on, I feel like it's worth mentioning that each series kind of tried to introduce new game mechanics as it went along, because to tie in, with, hey, these shows are just giant commercials for the actual card game, right?
Mm-hmm.
In GX, a large overarching mechanic was fusion, which existed before that, but they introduced like a million other ways to do it, whether it was cards that could do it on their own, or like Ryo had a card in his deck called Power Bond, which is specific to machine type monsters. It was you would fusion summon a monster and then double its attack strength. But at the end phase of your turn, you would take damage equal to that monster's original attack strength if it's still in play. And when you have a monster like Cyber End Dragon, which has 4,000 base attack strength, that is your card that you pull when you say, I want to win and I want to win now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were other variants like Future Fusion, which I still don't fully understand. It deals with like banishing cards, so they come back into play later. Whatever. 5Ds introduced synchro monsters, which the way it worked was you would have a tuner monster and you would tune it to other non-tuner monsters. You would add their levels together, and then you would special summon a synchro monster from your extra deck. For those who are unlearned, the extra deck is where you keep stuff like fusion monsters, synchro monsters, and other types of monsters, which we will get to as we move forward. But yeah, I want to touch on that real quick because that will come up as we move forward, because the next series is Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal.
The Black Sheep.
I think I watched maybe 15 episodes of this. I actually recently started trying to watch this, and at some point I will try and finish watching it, but
why though?
Oh boy. It starts off with this character Yuma. Yuma is like, yeah, I'm gonna be the best duelist, even though I know jack dick about how to play the game. I'm constantly in a state of making bad decisions.
Oh boy. So he's basically Ash Ketchum.
Yeah. So at one point, this spirit named Astral appears to him, and Astral is like trying to guide him through each duel, and he's like, man, fuck you, Astral. I play the game how I want. And it's like, dude, you're fucking stupid. Just listen to the advice he's giving you and you'll win the game.
Sounds like a very frustrating main character that I would not have been able to stick 15 episodes with.
Yeah, I mean, I think he changes for the better later on, but I have no idea how long it takes to get to that point.
I mean, I'm all for character development, but please start it sooner. So I fucking don't have to deal with this dumb kid all the time.
The big hook in Zexal is that there are these monsters that are called numbers, and each number has, its own different ability and appearance because
wow.
Yeah. And there's this guy, this evil professor doctor guy whose name I can't remember, but I think it was Dr. Faker. That's it. Dr. Faker, who is like out to get the numbers for himself. And then later on, they broke up Zexal into like 2 separate series for some reason.
What the hell?
Yeah, there was Zexal and then Zexal 2. And I guess the big bad at the end of Zexal 2 was Don 1000, which is an actual card that exists. Good luck actually playing it, but it is apparently another one of those win button cards. As I recall, Don 1000 is something like it has 10,000 attack strength, 10,000 base attack strength. You cannot declare an attack with it. But on your opponent's turn, your opponent has to declare an attack of some kind, or else they have to forfeit the game. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the power of Don 1000 or fucking whatever. Yeah, Zexal is such a weird, like, sidestep that's not great. I mean, I feel like they were trying to re-gear it towards a younger audience from how, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX and 5Ds, as you sort of go along, the age group kind of slowly slides up, I feel like.
Yeah, it makes sense. The thing, or the age group they introduced the whole game two with dual monsters would grow up while watching that series. And then, at some point, they might be, because those are by nature not interested in the card game anymore, they would try to cultivate like a younger audience, like a new fan base. And for that, the commercial vehicle, which is the show, would need to adjust certain things to appeal to that new audience, I guess.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it didn't work out for Zexal or Zeal or whatever it was called.
Yeah, that's right. In Japanese, it's pronounced like Zale or something.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, Zexal just like was this weird sidestep with, frankly, unappealing character designs, really weird monster designs. Like Yuma's deck is like this mishmash of like with like really oddly named monsters. Like I think there's one like Bababa Warrior, like Gagaga Magician, and it's like you're really hitting on your core crowd with these super dope names, guys. Like, and I mean, I don't think either of those names are right, but whatever. It was like this, like a 3-syllable, and then whatever kind of monster it was.
It sounds
Whatever.
like they tried to go the more wacky route they went with some of GX and went a bit too far in the wrong direction.
They also tried to be like, oh, duels take place in augmented reality now, which was like,
Wait,
okay.
I mean, the dual discs and dual monsters already were augmented reality, to be honest. So
Kind of, but the way they played it was, each character had like a visor or a pair of glasses, or they called them D-gazers, where you would put it on and you would see like, the monsters in AR when, I guess other people without the gazers couldn't see them. And that sort of gave them free reign with the like attack and defense and life point counters to sort of have them be a bit more like organically popping up as like background elements, which
interesting.
Okay, that was cool. That was neat. But boy, Yuma comes swinging out of the gate saying that I forget how they translate that. He's like pop fly into victory. Yeah, it's like shut up.
Catchphrase.
The big mechanic they introduced this time was XYZ monsters, which admittedly are kind of interesting. The way it works is you have to have 2 or more monsters of the same level in play, and then what you do is you overlay them together, and then you could summon from your extra deck an XYZ monster, and it has like this cool like black card backing on it, and you would physically place it on top of the other cards that it was overlaying, basically. And the cards that are attached to it are referred to as overlay material, and all XYZ monsters have effects like, it'll be like remove 1 overlay material to activate this effect, whatever it is. And, hey, that's a cool way to take and reuse monsters in a pretty cool way. I still think XYZ monsters are neat. It's just, nothing about Zexal made them seem cool in its context. So it's like, man, I don't know. Like I said, the character designs were unappealing. The main character is a loud, annoying dumbass. Jesus Christ. So like I said, I think back when Zexal started airing, when it was in fan sub land, I think I watched maybe 2 episodes back then. And recently, maybe earlier this year, I watched maybe 10 or 15 episodes, and I was like, "Oh boy, if I want to get through this, it's gonna be an endurance test." So I don't know if I'll actually sit down and watch it all the way through someday. I mean, I've seen clips of the finale where the numbers get way too big. Like way too big. Like my monster has 200,000 attack strength, and I'm just like, cool. All right. Sure.
I mean, they already went so crazy and dumb, I guess they were like, oh, fuck it. Let's go all the way to Stupid Town.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, the since I like keep bringing up the topic of music, and I know I've talked about this before, in particular when we talked about Recovery of an MMO Junkie, because that show is also scored by the same person. It goes by the name Konish, and the music in Zexal is hands down the best part of the show. It's way more sweeping and just over the top and just crazy orchestral awesomeness than it deserves to be. It's really, really fucking good, man.
What a waste.
I know. I know. But yeah, Zexal is just
hard pass.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So what about the next one?
After that was Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, which centered around a young boy named Yuya who wants to entertain the world with duels. Arc 5 sort of is the next evolution of the whole duel system that was originally introduced. Kaiba introduces it as the Solid Vision system way back in Duel Monsters. And Solid Vision is supposed to be like, oh, the big next evolution of holographic technology. In Arc 5, they sort of take that to the next level where the technology has progressed to the holograms now have actual mass. So it's called, I think, like the solid mass system now, where the people can actually physically interact with the monsters they summon, which kind of introduces this new like dynamic feel to what they dub action duels, where they're like, now duels are like this big giant spectacle and they're for entertainment and everyone's here to watch this a big giant like circus show of a duel. And every time Yuya introduces himself, even in the original Japanese, he just calls out to the crowd, ladies and gentlemen, that sort of thing.
It's showtime!
I mean, he might as well say that.
Biko!
And his deck is built around Entermate monsters. I think they call them Performa Pals in English. That's it. Which I guess probably conveys what they're trying to go for better than Entermate. All right. So Arc 5 starts off pretty neat because it's like one of the only shows to have like one solid story that runs throughout. It deals with, there are these parallel worlds that these dimensions that exist parallel to our world, and each of those worlds where they play the children's card game, the way they play it hinges upon a different mechanic. I might as well get it out of the way now. In Arc 5, they attempted to introduce pendulum summoning, which is dumb and weird, and to this day I don't understand it. The way it works is pendulum monsters have like a pendulum value on them, and you set them on the field according to their values on the left and right side of the monster zones. And then you can special summon from your extra deck monsters whose levels are between those ranges. And when monsters summon that way are just sent back to the extra deck and you can resummon. Pendulum summoning doesn't make any sense. Fuck it. We're just moving past that.
All right.
But which is dumb, which is bad of me to say because Yu-Gi-Oh's deck hinges on the whole pendulum element. But yeah, these other dimensions center around stuff like, you know, all of the stuff that we've seen previously, like synchro summoning and fusion summoning and XYZ summoning and that sort of thing. And there are parallel versions of Yuya in each dimension, and we find out much later on that there was this like evil super duelist that was sort of broken up and spread across dimensions. And hey, guess what? Yuya and his other dimension selves are part of that entity. And it turns out that, you know, hey, when they all gather in the same place, this evil super duelist is going to come back and bloody blue. Arc Five's plot is kind of weird and flimsy, but they tried. They tried really hard. The big hook behind Arc 5 is that, oh, hey, you remember some of the characters from the previous series that you knew and loved? Well, they exist in these parallel worlds, which is neat. Like in the Synchro dimension, we have Jack Atlas and Crow Hogan. Thanks, guys. You gave us the
What?
character we wanted.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. God. In the fusion dimension, we have like Asuka, who I didn't really talk about her when we talked about GX, but she was like one of the side characters who had like this sort of like uh dancer ballerina deck. I think the archetype was called Etoile. And she's there. She's pretty cool. As well as this one character who was in another character in GX called Ed Phoenix, who was like this asshole turncoat stab you in the back jerk face who now he's actually really evil and trying to help the bad guys in the fusion world take over all of the other worlds, and it's a thing that exists.
Sounds pretty convoluted.
Yeah, a little bit. So one of the other big plot points hinges on Yuya trying to find his father, and he ends up traveling to these other worlds to try to find him. And his father has been leading the resistance, a losing battle against the forces of the fusion world, and I guess that part is kind of interesting, especially when they sort of all come together and they lead an assault on the headquarters of the fusion world, which is called Academia, by the way. So, I mean, Arc 5 has some neat callbacks, but it doesn't really come together in a meaningful way. God, especially the ending. I think, I don't know if I really said so on here, but I know I've said to you and to others that Arc 5 kind of ends on a really weird, wet fart of an ending.
Is it because like there's just a very short battle at the end and nothing is wrapped up, or what's the reason for that? Because it sounds like they were really trying to do like this Avengers style thing where everything that has been building up or been mentioned or whatever in the previous seasons is now coming together and is brought up again, like the ultimate fan service Yu-Gi-Oh season, and then something happened where they just couldn't make the story work by the end of it.
So, I mean, after some of the other characters defeat, and I didn't look up the name of the big bad that Yuya and the others turn into, and I can't remember it. I'm sorry. After they defeat him, they have to like seal him away, and there's this character that they meet partway through who is like the adopted little brother. Spoilers. He's actually a girl. Uh-oh. Of one of the other characters who's like raised as like this child soldier type thing in this other world, and she has like no emotions and like but she's like constantly in fear of everything around her. And at the end of the series, she gets returned to being a baby, and the spirit of the evil duelist is within her. And in order to finally banish away the evil, Yuya has to make her laugh. So he has this cross-dimensional writing duel with Jack and like a bunch of other characters, and it's like that's your ending. That's
Okay.
That's your ending, really? That's what you're going with?
So the girl is the audience, and it's like, hey, all the passion of the people in this franchise, and all of it is what keeps us alive, and we have to be imaginative to make them work. And the tragedy of it all that this wasn't working in the end. So they kind of fucked up what they were trying to do and say in the finale. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have a show like Reach for the Stars and then fail, then not do something interesting at all and be super mediocre. So it sounds like Arc 5 at least try to do something that was something like a love letter to the franchise.
Yeah.
And then just couldn't quite wrap it up like the way it deserved to.
Yeah, I mean, it started off real strong, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and then it just does not have the follow through at the end, which is like, "Oh, all right, cool."
It all comes down to the writing. I mean, you can always expect so much from, I don't know, a commercial vehicle like that.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, right? It's like, this is not fucking Shakespeare. This is not. I mean, you don't like Shakespeare, so that's probably a bad comparison. But maybe it is for you. But this is not like High Literature Art or whatever, or the writing is maybe not even the most important thing in those shows. It's the cool card battles and what else you can think of that's happening in there. But it would have been nice if they have such an interesting setup that they would have pulled that through until the end, and this being like the biggest Yu-Gi-Oh thing that has a bunch of nice callbacks and everything, and makes you feel like, hey, this could be like the ending to the whole franchise if they didn't go on after that.
Yeah.
But apparently that would have been not a great thing to end on, which is a shame.
Well, and continuing the theme of dope music, we had Kotaro Nakagawa. If you recognize that name, you've probably watched Code Geass. So you had dope backing tracks on this as well. It's so weird because every Yu-Gi-Oh series has such fire music, and then it's a mixed bag because I still love Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole, but I'm not gonna deny that, boy, it has some low points along the way. Like Zexal is like Arc 5 starts off strong, it just falls apart, man. Because I mean the duel with Zark, that was the big bad's name in this. The duel with Zark is awesome because you have all of the other characters joining together in this like massive like tag battle to take him down, and Zark's like,
I love tag battles, so that sounds completely up my alley.
Zark is like, nah, brah, screw all you. I'm gonna win this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes it all the more sad that they couldn't like make it work completely if there are so many awesome moments in there. But this is super long running franchises, and getting as much good stuff out of that as we got, and we haven't even gotten to the most recent show yet. This is probably, I mean, it's good. I mean, there have been more other long running franchises that probably got mediocre a lot faster and didn't do anything new and interesting, or didn't even try to do something new and interesting on the way, and are still running for some fucking reason. And I guess you could be grateful that at least Yu-Gi-Oh tries to do something with the limited thing that it has, which is like, hey, you always have to bring it back to the fucking card game, and then try to make the story as weird and out there as possible at some point. So, dual monsters being a good thing, GX being a good thing, 5Ds apparently being a good thing. Then getting to one really weird and bad show and one show that started good but just fucking faded out.
It was so weird because Zexal was just such a sharp drop off.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if they kept the writers for any of the shows, like, if it was just a completely new crew.
Yeah, I mean, there are some writers that stayed. They kind of changed on and off throughout the franchise's run. And so did the directors. Like, I don't think the directors really stayed constant throughout. So
But this is not based, like, any of the seasons after Duel Monsters are not based on the manga anymore, right?
There were manga adaptations, but just like adaptations.
But the anime came first.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so,
At least you got good music out of all seasons.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah. Go check out every single sound duel for every single show because they're awesome. But yeah. Oh, I'm looking at it now. Arc 5 had the same director as 5D. So, it had some I guess I explained why, it was stronger than Zexel, but what are you gonna do, right? But yeah, so all of this brings us to the show that I actually want to talk about, Yu-Gi-Oh!
We have
VRAINS,
arrived.
which is the sixth series, the fifth spin-off, I guess. So Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS. Let me here. I'll read the actual story synopsis for y'all. There's a city where network systems have evolved, Den City. In this city, with the advanced network technology developed by the corporation Soul Technologies, a virtual reality space called Link Vrains. You're going to love what VRAIN stands for. Virtual Reality Artificial Intelligence Network System
Fantastic.
has been developed. By using Link Vrains, which was built inside the network system, duels unfold where duelists change their appearance separate from their real life identities, and in this VR space become excited over the latest way to duel. However, in Link Vrains, a mysterious hacker group that hacks via dueling has appeared, the Knights of Hanoi. Their goal is to destroy the AI world known as Cybers that exists somewhere in the depths of the network. But there's one duelist who stands against the threat to Link Vrains. His name is Playmaker. He has become famous in the network world for crushing the Knights of Hanoi in fierce duels without mentioning his name. But the true identity of Playmaker is an ordinary high school student, Yusaku Fujiki, who pursues the Knights of Hanoi that appear in Vrains in order to find out the truth of an incident that happened in his past. So we just go full on revenge plot in this show.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, Yusaku, Playmaker, ends up being part of this event called the Lost Incident, which a whole bunch of kids are kidnapped and forced to duel to stay alive. It's like,
Good lord.
yeah, dude. And really it's really dark because it's like, god damn. The big hook this time around is, as you might expect from the name, Link monsters. Link monsters are big. They have specific summoning attributes where it's like, oh, you need to tribute I don't know, I'm just pulling this out of my head right now. You need to tribute two specifically warrior type monsters in order to summon this Link monster. Link monsters are kind of interesting because they have arrows. They have what are called link arrows that point to other spaces on the game board. And when they point to other monsters, they endow them with different effects, or themselves with different effects, depending on the monster. And it sort of changes the way the game is played on a fundamental level where your positions of the cards on the field kind of matter now, which is pretty cool actually, because I remember seeing it and I was like, what is this dumb this dumb triple triad tetramaster shit that they're trying to bring into Yu-Gi-Oh? But they kind of make it work in a neat way. They also introduce a method of playing the game that's more common to one of the arcade games, the dual terminal. It's called speed duels, where you have a deck that's a smaller size, typically 20 cards instead of 40, and the size of the field is smaller, where you have, instead of 5 monster and spell zones, you have 3 each. But they also introduce this element called an extra monster zone, where each player has an extra spot where they can summon a monster. And they sort of demonstrate that linking monsters together is the new meta, because when two link monsters point towards each other, they call that co-linking. And if you can co-link enough monsters around your side of the field, you can take over your opponent's extra monster zone. So you can take over, a part of your opponent's side of the board, which, is an interesting mechanic that they try to explore as the series goes on. Again, obviously, it's just a vehicle for, hey, you should play the game, try playing the game this way, and check out this new card type. But, more to the point, the story centers around this revenge story where Yusaku is trying to find the people who did this really bad shit to all these kids over the course, of a pretty, decent chunk of time. And he ends up having a clash with not only these Knights of Hanoi and their leader, who dubs himself Revolver.
He's living the no-guns life.
I mean, he's got the aesthetic down. He's got like his avatar in Link VRAINS has like these bullet earrings that he wears, and his archetype is like these barrel load dragons, they're called.
Seems extremely on brand.
Yeah, where like one of the monsters has like just a giant revolver chamber in its body.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, the theming is clearly there. But yeah, Yusaku teams up with this guy Kusanagi, who basically kind of ends up being his eyes on the outside, while Yuya. Fuck. While Yusaku,
Can happen. They all start with you.
They do. While Yusaku is in Link VRAINS, he ends up butting heads with the Soul Technologies Corporation several times, and one of its higher ups. Oh fuck! What was his name? His name is Zyzen, and Zyzen is looking to help Soul Technologies further like AI research and whatnot. And at one point, there like these rogue AIs that exist in the network that came from what I mentioned before during the synopsis. This like these rogue AIs that exist in this pocket of the network system called the Cyberse. Still kind of weird that I still think it was weird that it was Cyberse and not Cyverse. I don't know. Something about the pronunciation is weird to me. That's neither here nor there, though. That's just my own 2 cents. And from this Cyberse emerged these autonomous AI called the Ignis. And to stay on brand with Yu-Gi-Oh, each Ignis is themed after one of the elemental attributes that monsters can have in the game. Because, sure. Yusaku ends up kind of taking hostage, sort of, the Dark Ignis, and he calls him I. Because when he's sitting in Yusaku's dual disc, he looks like a giant eye. Okay, sure. And the Knights of Hanoi are out there to get a hold of the Ignises as well. And Revolver is like, all AI is bad. Like, no exceptions, all AI is bad, and I'm going to crush them all. And like his big aim is to, rid the world of AI because the people have become too reliant on them, sort of thing. Which, again, you're touching on some real world themes, my dude. But yeah, in a lot of the conceit of this story actually kind of rests on, are AI actually, do they deserve to be treated the same way as people, because they are their own entities and whatnot. I'm not sure how much it plays into the whole revenge plot, but, it's still neat to see this sort of happening on the side that, Yusaku's aim sort of ends up being, hey, you can coexist with the AI. They're not all evil. But when it turns out that, one of the Ignises, Lightning, his plan is to just take everything over. Lightning ends up being the linchpin that's like, that basically says, yeah, because of my own existence and my aims, we can't coexist. With all of the simulations that I've run, everything comes down to me being super evil. So, go with what you know, dude. I don't know if it's more mature, but it's a different sort of think piece as far as Yu-Gi-Oh stories go. Um,
It's
and
at least sounds like it's trying to go, I don't know, to try something more substantial in terms of story, aside from Arc 5 trying to do all the all-encompassing fan service stuff. It sounds like, okay, let's try to do a story that is actually about something this time
yeah,
around,
yeah.
and that is maybe kind of relevant to current times and certain things. So yeah, it sounds like they were again, trying something different, which, you learn to appreciate about this franchise while listening to how all the different approaches all those different seasons took. Because again, this seems to be something else again. Like, hey, here is the sci-fi plot. This is also about something, something more than than the other shows were.
It's kind of like I don't know if we've really talked about it on the podcast before, but I feel like it's kind of like Gacha Man crowds because that was sort of thematically similar in the way that it's like an over reliance on using the network and
Yeah,
information overload and this like hive mind existence among
yeah.
people. So, it's kind of touching on similar themes. I don't know if I'd call one or the other more significant than each other.
I can't speak for Reigns. Gatchaman crowds by the end didn't work for me because it the message it conveys at the end got completely let's say demolished by things that happened later in real life, where it's like, hey, we all come together and the internet is a good thing, and if everyone has a voice and everyone, I don't even can't sum it up all anymore, but ultimately what it was trying to say is a good thing was then in real life turned into a bad thing by all the Gamergate people and stuff like that.
Mm,
So that had a really bad aftertaste.
yeah.
Like all that stuff happening felt like okay, maybe you were onto something, Gatchaman crowds, but this is how it would work in real life and not in your optimistic dreamland.
Mm.
Which is something I might bring up later when it comes to certain things in the series we're going to talk about next. But yeah, I don't know how VRAINS approaches the whole thing. Like, is it even bringing up something that comparable and then going the optimistic route and hey, let's all work together and things will work out, or is it trying to be more realistic about the whole shit? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we have the two swing sides of the argument where Revolver is like, yeah, all AI is bad, or all autonomous AI is bad, sort of thing. And Yusaku was like, yeah, it's not all bad, dude. We can coexist with it. And then we have Soul Technologies that's trying to control and use AI for its own end. Because at one point they developed these like dolls, these shells that can be inhabited by AI, so then they can inhabit the real world. And that sort of ties in with the last major arc where Yusaku defeats Bowman, but at the cost of Ai sacrificing himself. Or so we think. Because then Ai comes back in the final arc and he's like, you know what? Maybe I should just do the thing that Lightning was trying to do to begin with. And he becomes sort of evil, kind of. And the unfortunate part about the last arc of the show is that it's really rushed.
No, okay.
The
That's
first
like something again, like with Arc 5 happened here.
the first and middle arcs are about 50 episodes each ish. The last arc is only about 20 episodes, but even despite it being rushed, I feel like the ending is pretty satisfying because I and Yusaku have their reconciliation, and I just sort of says, "Hey, you know what, bro? I guess you were right all along. I'm sorry I decided to be a bad guy. That wasn't me." And he just sort of disappears. His essence sort of like fades away into the network, and for all we know, he has been deleted or destroyed until we get a weird post-credit scene at the end of the series where we just see Ai's eye,
Okay.
and that's what we're left with. And I don't know if they were trying to tease like an OVA or a movie or something. I mean, there's a new series starting, I think this coming May. So we'll see if it's
just still going strong.
we'll see if it's a new, if it's a continuation of VRAINS, which I kind of doubt, or if it's. I mean, a lot of people are hoping that it's like a reboot of Duel Monsters. I don't know about that. It would be a neat 20th anniversary little celebration. But yeah, VRAINS is pretty cool overall, and I enjoyed it. Do have some misgivings about it, though. Like, there's one character they introduce, Zaizen's little sister, Aoi. She takes on the persona in Link VRAINS Blue Angel, and she's like this idol duelist that everybody loves. Because, okay. But,
Well, that's what idols are in anime.
yes.
They bring the world together.
But she at one point sort of starts to get controlled by Hanoi, and Yusaku has to like duel her back, back to her right mind, and that's fine, that's whatever. Every duel that Aoi takes part of, she ends up losing, and it sucks because the other big female character that they have in there, Ghost Girl, she is really cool too, and she has some awesome moments. But I was really hoping that Aoi would have, her big win at some point, and she never really does. I felt like they did her dirty all throughout the show. She tries to reinvent herself, and she changes her persona twice, from Blue Angel to Blue Girl to finally Blue Maiden. And
Great.
And the word maiden has, as we know, has some great connotation to it. There's never any moment where it's like, oh, she's damsel in distress. But the fact that she never wins sucks. But yeah, aesthetically, VRAINS is pretty cool because all of the speed duels take place on, the characters are riding on these like hoverboards in VR where they're like jetting through the skies, and that's pretty cool. So, VRAINS has, aesthetically and thematically, some cool stuff going on, but there's some characters that I wish they could have, treated a little better. But, I guess some characters are gonna get tossed by the wayside, but that still sucks. Later on, Yusaku meets this other guy, Takeru, who has the online handle Soul Burner, which hey, that's actually pretty cool. I like that. Um, but yeah, Takeru was also one of the kids who was part of the Lost incident, and when he gets free, he finds out that his parents are trying to find him, and it gets into some weirdly heavy shit where it's like, yeah, his grandparents tell him, he gets free, he meets his grandparents, he's like, oh, where's mom and dad? Takeru, they died in an accident trying to find you.
What the hell?
Oh shit, dude. Takeru, before he was kidnapped, he sort of had this spat with his parents, and he was like, man, how can I apologize to them that they're gone? I'm never going to see them again. And he's like, I feel it's like such a loser. I feel so pathetic that I can't. And Revolver looks at him and he says, dude, it's not pathetic to feel that way, and you don't have to apologize because those who are gone haven't completely vanished from your life. They just went ahead earlier. And it's like, this shit got like,
not bad.
This shit got like weirdly, like strongly emotional in that moment. And I was like, damn, dude. That scene, out of all the scenes in the show, hit like real hard. So It
I love that
has,
the show actually goes places like that.
yeah, dude.
Wouldn't really expect it
Yeah, it wasn't.
from
It wasn't.
toy vehicle, basically.
Yeah, it wasn't expected, but it was like really welcome to see this moment of like, hey, bro, it's all right. You just gotta, keep them in your heart, man. And it's like, oh, because Revolver has this like pretty strong turnaround in that moment. That's like, yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through this, but you just have to keep going on, man. So it's a good moment. It's probably like the one of the single strongest emotional moments in the show, aside from Yusaku and Ai's reconciliation at the end. Vrains goes to some unexpected places, but I feel like it's really good for it. So, I feel like on the whole, it was really enjoyable and worth watching. Like I was surprised that, in spite of like me and some other friends were like, yeah, dude, the ending was rushed. It felt like there were some things that they probably could have taken a few extra episodes to deal with, like because Zaizen answers to this like unseen council at Soul Technologies. Like we only ever see like one character out of them. This character was just called Queen, and it would have been neat to see more of that and how that sort of tied in. But we were cut short by probably like at least 20 episodes. So I think what we got in the end though was still pretty cool. So I don't know. I liked it.
I mean, now you've talked about pretty much all seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! So what is your personal favorite?
Oh boy, I feel like the original is probably the most realized of the lot, and I feel like it established everything that came after it pretty strongly. But that's not to say that there weren't other good series after that. But I do think that I would honestly probably go with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. But the other shows are there's something to enjoy out of all of the other ones too, except for Zexel. But yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that Brains was composed by Shinkichi Mitsumune, who did Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters as well. And it's neat because you can hear some callbacks to some of the compositions from Duel Monsters, which was really neat. Like there was a little bit of motif. There's your $5 word of the day. In there where you could hear, oh yeah, this this song is sort of thematically similar to some of the stuff that was in Duel Monsters, and I thought that was cool. They also brought back one of the guys who performed one of the intro themes for Duel Monsters to do a couple of the opening themes for Vrains, which again, pretty cool. That they had just enough of, yeah, we brought in, something to tether you to the original series, but this series is, new and doing its own thing as well. I feel like I should also mention this show had two directors. It was the first 13 episodes were directed by Masahiro Hosoda, and then 14 to the end were headed up by Katsuya Asano, and there were a lot of recap episodes, like at least four during the series run. And Asano took to Twitter to actually apologize for that. But he said, hey, sorry, there's so many recaps, but we promise you this is for the good of the overall quality of the series. And, the series, the production values were decent, I guess. It wasn't, anything like super stellar, but it also wasn't anything I would call bad. So I feel like in spite of those recap episodes, it was better for it. Vrains, in this whole odyssey that we've gone through today with me prattling on about Yu-Gi-Oh for oh my god, close to 2 hours. I'm sorry, everyone. uh it's a fun series with some neat stuff going on, and I feel like, it has enjoyable elements all throughout, from like the characterization to the music to seeing the different deck structures and, kind of turning the gears for ideas for me when I was playing a little bit of Duel Links that helped me build some a warrior deck with some good structure to it that kind of won me a few games. But Yu-Gi-Oh is very long running, at this point 21 years strong, enduring series that it's just cool to see it come back all the time. And, I like to see what it's bringing to the table. Like I said earlier, in the Americas, you can watch pretty much the entirety of the show on Crunchyroll now. So if you're interested in it, you've got like 500-600 episodes of series to watch, so you have no shortage of Yu-Gi-Oh!
15 years ago, a mysterious hyperspace gate appeared over the Pacific Ocean in our world. Elves, fairies, and other fantastic creatures came through the gate from the other side and established diplomatic relations with Earth. In the present day, Cariana Island and its main city of San Teresa serves as Earth's front door to this magical world on the other side of the gate called Semania. And over 2 million non-humans live within the city, mixing with additional human residents. This results in both prosperous growth for the island and a seedy underbelly of criminals who seek to take advantage of it. The San Teresa Metropolitan Police Department is established to keep order within the city between those two forces. After a drug bust goes horribly wrong, Detective Sergeant K. Matoba loses both the ferry being sold as a catalyst for new drugs and his partner of 4 years in the Metropolitan Police to a Semanian attacker. Despite his attitude towards the Semanian people he derisively calls aliens, Matoba is forced to partner with the stuck-up Semanian knight Tilarnar Exedilica to find the ferry lost in the drug bust, as they consider the ferry an important Semanian citizen. Can Kay and Tilarnar overcome their resentments and prejudices to form a partnership strong enough to conquer the trials this case has in store for them and the shadows that lurk in the darkest parts of the city? So Copcraft is based on a light novel, not on an MMORPG, as the name might maybe suggest. And the light novel is written by Shoji Gato, who also wrote Full Metal Panic, probably one of my favorite light novels that got an anime adaptation. And I tend to forget that actually is a light novel originally, because it doesn't feel too like one.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Oh, I forget that.
It's super weird. Because I now associate light novels automatically mostly with isekai trash. Because that's been coming out of that corner for like the past couple of years.
I mean, the story is technically an isekai?
Yeah, I guess.
In the most stringent sense of the word?
Yeah, we don't have any superpowered person in there, really. I mean, if you want to call Tilarna, but she really isn't. So I guess, yeah, but no, this is more like a fantasy thing, or like something like Blood Blockade Battlefront or something like that. Or Bright, which we mentioned in our teaser for episode, because this is what the show basically is. It's the same as that weird Netflix movie with Will Smith called Bright, where he's teaming up with a bunch of, I don't know what they were, ogres or orcs or something. Yeah, I think they were orcs. And yeah, this is basically also what this show is. But yeah, I've never read the light novels for Full Metal Panic, but I like the anime for FMP, all seasons, some more than others. But I enjoyed them. And the Copcraft light novel was illustrated by another familiar name, Renji Murata. I think that's how it's pronounced in this case. It's spelled range or range, but I think I heard someone told me who is definitely more capable when it comes to Japanese language, told me that it might be pronounced Renji. So yeah, who also did the character designs for Blue Submarine No. 6 and Last Exile. And yeah, he did the designs for the light novel for Copcraft as well. And those designs were adapted by Hiromi Kimura for the anime. pretty well, I'd say. Very streamlined for sure, but still rather faithful in my opinion. And considering how detailed and delicate Murata's paintings are, it's very hard to adapt them 100% faithfully into anime. Pretty much the same as with Kentaro Miura's stuff.
You know what? I'm looking at the character designs, and now I kind of see it.
Yeah. But I think this is a good version of those designs. Like I said, very streamlined, very simplified, but still like the original spirit, the original design spirit of Murata's in there. The light novel is has been running since 2009 and still is, and currently has 6 volumes. I don't know how much of the source material is adapted in these 12 episodes of anime, but I assume there is room for a second season. I don't know if we'll get one, but I assume there's more source material available.
I would kind of hope so, but
Yeah, it would be great. It would be great, but this also could be like this one shoot or thing that I don't know how popular it got. I mean, I guess we'll see. But yeah, the story is closed off enough by the end here. So if this just turns out to be a one-off, then that's fine. But also the universe leaves enough room to have more seasons, especially if there's more source material left. The animation production of this series was handled by Milipensi, a relatively young studio that was founded by ex-Shaft/Gainax producer Naoko Shiraishi. And Milipensi have mostly done in-between animation for a bunch of stuff like Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, Wake Up Girls, Kuroko's Basketball, or Attack on Titan. But they also did the animation for TQ, at least starting from season 4 onwards.
The legend will never die.
Indeed. And on the new Berserk TV series. That legend of awfulness will also never die. But I assume they are responsible for the few traditionally painted and animated shots in that show, because I think the CG, which is what that series mostly was done by Gamba, if I'm not mistaken. And the traditionally animated stuff in Berserk was actually good. The problem is there was just not enough of it. So that's a shame. But that's why it was so jarring. Every time Berserk went to actually traditionally animated stuff, it looked so much better than the rest of the show. So yeah, if that was handled by Milipensi, then at least that was a good thing about the Berserk show. And another link to Berserk is the director of Copcraft, Shin Itagaki, because he also directed that. But also pretty much every OVA and TV series Milipensi has produced until now. He also directed Black Cat, the Devil May Cry anime of all things, Bento.
Oh, hell yeah.
And again TQ. So there you go. The script for this show was written in part by the original author of the light novel, Shoji Kato, and a few episodes were written by Shingo Nagai, who also wrote scripts for World End, Symphogear, and was also the literature manager for Valvrave the Liberator, which, I have no idea how Valvrave and literature even can be mentioned in the same sentence without sounding like a crazy person.
No.
But here we are, I guess.
No.
I don't know what that job description entails.
Maybe it means like a lore master or something. I don't know.
Guess maybe.
Because I've seen that title before, but I'm not sure.
But yeah, questionable content. What's not questionable is the soundtrack of the show, which is also fantastic, composed by Taku Iwasaki, who I think we have mentioned on this show before. Or was that a different Iwasaki? I don't know.
No, we
anyway
talked about him a little bit because, he did the Battle Tendency arcs music in JoJo's, and he's done a whole bunch of other stuff as well, like Gurren Lagann, Bungo Stray Dogs, Bento,
Noragami, Soul Eater, a bunch of good music under his belt. And the OP by Masayoshi Oishi is one of the best this season.
Oh, it's so good. I love Paradise City so much.
Yeah, great music, great spirited animation. It's a banger. It was really great.
The OP was really cool because there was like a break in the episodes with a recap pretty late. But when they came back, they changed the OP so that like the English language credits appeared as like neon lights in the background behind the Japanese ones, and that was so cool. Ah,
Yeah, it's fantastic. I also really like the ending where Tilana basically does karaoke. It's a nice touch because it's not only cool and funny, but also serves as some character building because it shows her getting more acquainted with human society and everything, and having like struggling with daily tasks. So yeah, it's pretty nice considering what the series is all about and what it's doing. That fits surprisingly well. Often like endings or EDs or OPs don't necessarily have to do that much with the series, especially not the EDs or what's happening in the series. Sometimes they're just showing off the girls. I mean, that's ED is doing that too. It's showing like, hey, here's a cute main female protagonist. But it's also like showing her doing something that is kind of important to the story in a weird way. So there you go. So this might be more of a loose review style than we usually do for first season reviews, because I didn't feel like basically writing a review script, which I usually do for those. So we'll see how this goes. It's the end of the year, people. What can I say?
Yeah, I apologize because work has overwhelmed me lately. I didn't really have a chance to write as extensive as notes as I kind of try to. So,
to quote Norman Osborn, "Don't apologize. I never do."
All right.
Oh, whatever. That fuckhead. Anyway. So yeah, the story kicks off by Kay's partner for 4 years, I think, gets killed. I forgot his name though. So
Rick.
It's like, it's not that important because it's like the typical hard-boiled detective setup where he's like, fucking Kay is this fucking grump.
Right. His name was Rick Fury.
Yeah, that's a fucking fighting game name if I've ever heard one.
Doesn't it sound very similar to a certain Marvel character?
Yeah, kind of. There are a bunch of references and callbacks to things in this show. And if you already like, this setup sounds like it's your typical 80s hard-boiled detective cliche thing, that's kind of what most of this show is. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a love letter to those kind of movies and TV shows and whatever. And it's like two unlikely partners from very different backgrounds having to find common grounds and overcome their animosities towards each other. And, you know, that's what this show is. It's Kay on the one side, who's like this super grump in the beginning, who not downright hates all Semanians, but he uses kind of racial slurs for them and stuff like that. Like, he's not a really nice guy in the beginning when it comes to that. Not at all. Like, borderline racist. And, you know, that's because he has made a bunch of bad experiences, because a lot of the people who do crime in the city are also Semanians. And, you know, all the drug dealers and stuff like that. What I mentioned in the summary, like, fairies from Semania can be which sounds super fucking gross and violent, can be basically ground into dust. And fairy dust is kind of like this super potent drug. And yeah, that's what Kay also has to deal with. And, you know, that he holds, you know, Semanian culture responsible for that partially, which is also not great. But, you know, that's how this is set up. He only basically sees the bad things that come from them coming to our world in the beginning, kind of. Or at least a lot of that stuff, because he has to deal with that on a daily basis. But it's also kind of one-sided. But he has not really had contact with a Semanian outside of, you know, his work cases. So he's lacking the whole picture. And this is where Tilana comes in, right? She enters the picture, helping him out with this case, because she's been ordered to, I think she's from like a higher family or something, like a very prestigious family in Semania.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she's exactly royalty, but she's up there. And she is tasked with overseeing like this investigation or aiding in this investigation. She also has a personal reason for that, because don't really, that is a spoiler, because I think it's already said in the first or second episode. The fairy that is like the basically the MacGuffin or the thing they go after in the first case is an old kind of childhood friend of her, and that's why she's personally interested in helping with this case and trying to find her. But there's also this bigger thing that Semenya is not really trusting the human investigators with this shit, so it's a kind of power struggle of jurisdiction and everything that's happening here. So, Kay's loud, yelling black captain decides to put them together, and if you heard me describing that, that's fucking, if you watch Beverly Hills Cop, if you've watched even the movie that already parodied all of that, which is Last Action Hero, that's of course is in here as well. Yeah, so you got so much stereotypes, so much cliches from these kind of movies that happened a lot in the 80s and 90s, I guess. And yeah, all of this is in here. Like, you got the captain, you got the two main female investigators of the police force, Cammy and Jamie, are basically dressed the entire runtime of the show like they're constantly undercover as prostitutes. That's how it is, and that's not great. But at least they're shown as being feisty and capable and good investigators, which is a thing I appreciated about the show. So it's like, okay, I get what the show is doing, and I get that this is this kind of love letter, and like basically the whole character roster of the show is mostly built from old cop movie cliches and tropes anyway. That's why I was willing to let the creators get away with design choices like that. So, all right. I can deal with that. That's fine. Because I know what the show was trying to do. I know what they were going for, and it kind of fit the tone. And yeah, let's say the choices the show made anyway, and where it was going with the story and everything. So that's fine. And this is basically the setup. And of course, there's something more behind all of this stuff. There's a conspiracy, there's someone from the Semenian side involved, there's someone from the human side involved, and all that culminates in a big climax. Well, it's not that big of an action climax, actually, but, it's like, hey, here's conspiracy, there's a lot of politics involved, and both sides are involved in that, and then that wraps up by the end of the season. Like, the story, the arc that the season starts with is actually finished by the end of the season. It feels very closed off in itself, very contained, and that's what I meant when I said we don't necessarily need a second season, because this is like a closed off story. The show is definitely saying what it's trying to say in this season, but there's also room for more, because Tilarna is in this world, and she and Kay have a great dynamic, so I would definitely like to see more of that. And yeah, that's probably the best thing about the show, is those two main characters and how they slowly grow fond of each other and learn to see something more in each other. And I don't mean romantically. I mean just seeing beyond, oh God, you're just another human and you're just another Semenian, right? And it's super obvious where the show is going with this, because this is like this thinly veiled allegory on immigrants, right? The Semenians are if you say this is normal, the rest of the island is the US, then the Semenians are, I don't know, Mexican people or whatever you want to choose as the immigrant of the day. And, then you have the typical resentments and racial tensions, because, one side thinks the other side is bringing all the bad stuff from their side over, and they're responsible for all the shit goes wrong. And the other side thinks they hold them responsible for everything for unjust reasons and stuff like that, and because they're racist. And, sometimes both parties are right, sometimes only one is right, and, you know how that goes. This show is basically about overcoming your prejudices, again, learning to find common ground and understand that both of you are just people and that you should work together, and that you have more in common than the things that keep you apart. At least that's how it should be. And that has been done in a lot of anime, kinda, just not that super obvious. Like, and by super obvious I mean how directly this show references certain contemporary politics. And we mentioned that in our review of Carol and Tuesday, which is also very much doing that, addressing current political situations in the US, definitely in the US and partially in Japan. And I would say Copcraft goes even further. One of the people running for the mayor's office or is it the governor's office? I don't remember.
I think it was governor.
Yeah, in for the island that it is whole set on. I forgot its name again. Cariana Island. There we go. So yeah, there's a political race for a new governor, and one of the people, the right wing guy who uses the racial tensions for his own gain, is called Domingo Duarte. So DT, you get it. I hope you get it what the show is doing. And yeah, it's pretty obvious. Though I feel like Domingo Duarte comes across as a bit more intelligent and I don't know, not as blatantly dumb and lying piece of shit as the real DT. So I don't know. It feels like more okay. You see where he's coming from, but he says he's a politician first and a human second. Kay asks him at some point, and he's like, "No, I would consider myself a politician first." And that's an overall. I don't want to give it away, but the short dialogue between those two is very interesting. So yeah, that's what the show is going for. It's directly throwing you in there and saying like, "Hey, here." Racism. This is what's happening today in our world, and we're gonna show you what we think about this in our series by just using the magical creatures from Semania as a shorthand for that, and as an allegory for all of that, and then set it in this familiar place of a metropolitan city. Yeah, and that's what the show is doing. And I was surprised how well it did what it did, John. How did you feel about how Copcraft handled all of that political stuff and, overcoming racism and overcoming prejudices and, looking beyond your own fences and everything?
It's hard to describe because it was so... Carol and Tuesday did a lot of the same. So, I mean, I'm having trouble finding the right words to adequately express what I think of it. But I mean, obviously the message that was there was, something important to think about. And for everyone who thinks that, politics can't be in video games and anime and other entertainment media, you're wrong. Like you're wrong. Let me point you toward this, as well as any number of other things that have come out in recent years. I mean, this takes a pretty definitive stance that hey, don't be racist. Maybe just don't do that. But it does show Kay's struggle with kind of coming around with all of his preconceived notions. I feel like pretty well, but that it shows that you can overcome that sort of thing. You don't always have to be a pig-headed racist piece of shit. If you listen to and try to understand someone, hey, guess what? Maybe you got more in common with them than you thought. And seeing the partnership between Talarna and Kay sort of start to slow, because it's not immediate, and if it did, then it would feel just like sort of
forced. Yes,
but we sort of start to see it slowly coming together, and it feels pretty natural, and like, hey, this could happen in real life too if you gave people a chance, sort of thing. But You know, I don't know.
It's a slow build up, and like you said, if it went from like one episode to another, now he suddenly likes her, that would have been,
That would have been
not believable.
disingenuous.
Yeah, exactly. That's not how it works. And I still think that the show is being too optimistic at the end, which how it wraps up certain things. That's not how the real world works. This is, again, like an idealized thing, just like Carol and Tuesday did at the end. Like, it's like, this is what we would like it to be. We would like it to be so easy to overcome all those things, and just ignoring the fact that there are just bad people in this world who want to believe this kind of stuff, who want to act this kind of stuff, this way, right? The shows just put that aside and are like, no, we're gonna show you what we think would be the best thing to do. We don't, you watch this and you think, yeah, that's probably not gonna happen. But it's nice that you think that this should happen, and you're right. It's just like, real life is more complicated than that, and they're just people that you won't be able to convince with this kind of sentiment. But still, yeah, it's slowly building. Kay, like I said, really mean to Lana in the beginning. She is also pretty mean to him in the beginning. She's more open, but you feel that she also harbors a lot of resentments toward Earthlings, because those cultures, Semanian and human culture, is very different. Like, for example, the Semani don't have TV, internet, or a lot of photos, so you can actually make money by smuggling porn magazines to their world, because they're not used to that. That's an actually very lucrative dark market over there. So they hold humans responsible for letting that get to their world, while the humans hold them responsible for letting the the special magical drugs shit being like washed into their world, right? So that is that is a point of contention. And then it's just like the language barrier, and just not seeing eye to eye in certain things. Like Semania has a very, very black and white attitude towards justice, so naturally Tilana has that too. And she's like, okay, this is clearly a bad guy, I'm just gonna cut him the fuck down. That's her attitude in the beginning. She's like no nonsense character. She doesn't give a shit. She's like, I am judge, jury, and executioner. And then Kay is like, yeah, wait, what the fuck? That's not how this works here. So, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand that this is not how our society works. So there's a lot of things where these two characters don't see eye to eye. But then, working together, eventually living together, because Tilara needs a home. And of course, Kay has a free room in this apartment, whatever, so she stays there. This is how these things go. And then, they bicker a lot in the beginning, but then very slowly you feel like, okay, now Tilarna did good in that case. In the beginning, she's very bothered her because she doesn't understand how Kay is approaching his cases. But then, she helps him with the case, and, actually, he learns to appreciate certain aspects of her and what she's doing and who she is. And that slowly builds up more and more. And that goes for both sides. Like, in the beginning, Tilana calls Kay, I think she pronounces his name, so that would mean fearful kitten in her language.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, a classy burn. And Kay has a cat, though he's allergic, which, shows, again, that he's kind of a dick, but with a heart of gold. But yeah, so that it's funny that she always, like, calls the cat and Kay basically the same. So that's funny. But that also leads to, at some point, Kay starts being interested in that. He starts speaking her language. This is like one of the great subtle things they put in there, where he just suddenly starts saying goodnight to her in her language, like after they grew a bit closer. And there are some really good little moments in this show where you see like, oh, okay, they finally slowly built towards an understanding and learning more about each other. And it doesn't feel rushed. It feels like a natural development of these two characters who come from very, very different backgrounds and then have to make it work. And then suddenly finding out that, hey, okay, we're not so different after all. This is, okay, I guess we can make this work. And I really liked how Copcraft approached that whole thing. I was surprised by that. I thought this would just be a dumb buddy cop action show. And then they just give me some actual cool character development. I always like when a show is surprising me in that way. I mean, maybe I should have expected that because, like I said, Full Metal Panic, I like Full Metal Panic, and that has stuff like that in there too, like some really potent character bits, and same author. So I guess Shuji Gato is just a good writer.
Yeah.
But yeah, considering the subject matter and how blunt and superficial this show seems, I was surprised to find something like that with a bit more finesse and a bit more subtext and substance in here. And it's definitely in this show. It's not super deep or anything. Like, it's not like this, whoa, okay, this is a fucking deconstruction of fucking racism and like the whole discourse on that, and look at all these many different perspectives. No, this is not what Copcraft is. This is still a dumb action show with a ridiculous conspiracy plot. But you know, there are things in there, there are bits in there that work really well, and that make you think, and that make you appreciate the characters more. And yeah, I really like that. I think there's some really good aspects in that show, in that regard. John, what did you think about the visuals of the show?
I mean, I thought, they were pretty solid. Everything was, I felt it was very striking. Just because, it had some great action sequences, but I know you kind of pointed out that some of the episodes had some still frames in them, and what was your take on that?
The still frames were not necessarily my problem. I mean, they were apparent that they were saving money because but kind of from the get-go, at least from the second episodes onward, or let's say from the third one, it is clear that the production just crumbles kind of under the ambition of or the directional style of Shin Itagaki, because he has a very unique and very vivid and frenetic direction style, and that's the same for all of his stuff that I've seen. That's the same in Black Cat, and it's the same, I don't know about TQ, but it was the same in Berserk as well. There is a lot of camera movement, like a lot of screen shaking, everything. Like the camera in Shin Itagaki shows is constantly on the move, and it is CG that might be, I guess, more easy to realize, and that's probably Berserk looked the best when the camera was constantly moving in the action scenes, because it was hiding some of the shortcomings of that. But in this, it feels like, okay, the fucking animators did their darndest and worked their ass off to make this work, but they just couldn't always keep up with the frenetic direction. There are a lot of weird choices when it comes to shots and camera perspectives as well, and there's also a Shin Itagaki trademark. Like, there's a bunch of weird close-ups, and a good example for that was in episode 10, like, which came really shaky to me in terms of really shaky to me in terms of quality. Like, lots of shortcuts, lots of still frames, again, which is not the biggest problem for me, but a lot of people talking off screen. Like, it's weird. Sometimes it feels really amateurish and hard to follow, and that's not necessarily because of either the animation quality not being up to snuff or the direction style of Shin Itagaki, but it's a mix of the two. Like, I feel like that director really needs a crew that can deal with that fucking crazy amount of camera movement, and I feel like the animators in this show couldn't often. Like, a lot of times it just looked janky. I don't know, maybe it just jumped out more at me than it did for you, but immediately when I watched that show, and I didn't know from the beginning that he was the director, immediately when I watched like the first episode, I was like, wait a minute, I know this director's style. They're fucking Shin Itagaki. And it was, of course. Of course it was. Like, from the beginning of Black Cat, I was like, this looks, whoa, holy shit, why is there so much camera movement? And yeah, it's just his style, and that direction will definitely not be for everyone, but it sounds like you enjoyed it. Like,
yeah, I mean, it didn't, I guess it didn't bother me so much. Like I acknowledge the whole still frame thing was definitely a money saver, but I mean, I feel like I would rather have a nice, clean still frame than super messy in-betweens. Um, I don't know. I guess with the still frames, you could argue is like, oh, they were kind of trying to go for a motion comic at some
Yeah,
parts.
I guess. But, there's some of model characters in there too, but that's not the thing that jumped out at me. It was just like, I felt like, okay, we have a lot of character movement, and it feels like the animation just can't keep up with this. It's like, okay, you needed a bit more time or budget or more capable people. I don't know. But sometimes it's just the show crumbles under the director's ambition. And it's like, okay, well, I guess maybe in the hands or in a different studio, this would have looked differently. But it never destroys the show. Like, it's never like, oh my God, this takes me completely out of the show. This is horrible. I can't watch this. It's just like, it's very apparent that this was, I don't know if it was rushed, but this was, maybe a more ramshackle production, or let's say not perfectly pulled off or constructed production. I don't know. But that's one of the things that were not so great about the show, but also again didn't take me out of the show. Like they didn't ruin it for me. I just would have liked, considering how much I liked the rest of the content story wise, I would have liked for the show to maybe look a bit better too. That would have been great. But it's not boring, like to look at because it's so weird. It's so out there sometimes. Like a bunch of the stuff you look at, why are they just showing that specific frame now? Why is it that camera perspective? This makes not really much sense in this fucking scene. It's like, it's weird. You just show fucking the back of someone's head and someone is talking, and then you show fucking their legs or something, and it's like it feels like it's trying to set a certain scene, but it's not appropriate to that scene, and it's weird. It's weird. But it's interesting. So aside from that, the action is cool. Like, there's some cool sword fights, some cool gun battles. I especially like the finale in terms of what they do with that, and how Tilarna and Kay fight and get rid of the final villain of this arc, who gets basically bested by rock music, which is chef's kiss. I always like stuff like that. So yeah, that's great. The show in general has a bunch of cliffhangers. Not as bad as Astra, or good as Astra, if you want to call it that, but still, it strings you along rather in a rather capable way. I think the only exception is, like, there are 2 episodes in the middle where Tilarna's gets, like, her consciousness gets transferred to the cat in the show.
Yeah.
Why I can't believe they spent more than 1 episode on that bullshit.
Yeah, that was weird, but
that was a weird show that got weirdly fan servicey too. Like, it felt like from a weird different show. Like, it had nothing, like, it shouldn't be in this one. And it was like, what is this? It had no effect really on the rest of the story. It felt like a weird filler thing, and it was not funny. It was not like thrilling or riveting. Nothing of interest really was happening. It just felt like this weird comedy one-off that just went for way too long. And I don't know why they put that in there, but it's there, and the show could have done without it. But you can easily skip it. I don't even think there's anything discussed in regards to the main plot in those 2 episodes, or at least in 1.5 of them. It's a weird hiccup. I don't know where that was coming from. If that is a novels too, and they decided they had to put it in there, or because they want to get to 12 episodes or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's weird. Like I said, I think the political stuff is handled kind of well. There's some stuff that doesn't quite work out. I think it's great that they have representation of a gay character in there.
Yeah.
Who is on the police force, but then they make him the damsel in distress in an episode, and that is a bit lame.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, he is a gay person, so has to be super femmy, and he has to be like physically weak, and also he came across as a bit predatory in that bar interrogation scene, and I felt like, okay, why? That's like one of the typical approaches you have with gay men in anime for some reason, like, or in games. Persona 5 had that too. That was dumb. That was one of the things I didn't like about Persona 5. One of the few things. It's like, you know, these typical, hey, here are these super prissy gay guys who are on the hunt for underage boys in the fucking city, and just fucking run after them and stalk them. And it feels like this is a really bad stereotype that is still prevalent when it comes to depicting gay men in Japanese media. And the character in this show that they do that with, that also kind of is done with that character. So that's a bit of a shame. It doesn't go overboard. It's just like, hey, it's part of the investigation. I have to do this. And then his partner says, but you actually like that stuff, don't you? And I'm like, why did you have to go there? It's like, again, weird little hiccup. Aside from that, that character is not bad. Like, it's not, he's not badly written. But there was one of the scenes where it's like, yeah, maybe.
Hey, maybe don't.
Maybe don't. Like, maybe, I don't know, think about it a bit more, or try to actually look at actual gay people and not do your weird. It's again, you could say that it maybe plays again into the 80s, 90s stereotype that was also then, I guess, prevalent in those kind of movies when it comes to gay people. But some things you should just update.
Yeah.
Because it's not a good look. It's not a good look. Another thing that maybe is not as great is, considering how close the politics and some people in the show are to themselves, or to some people in the real world, it could rub some people the wrong way who one of the people responsible for the big conspiracy is. Because it's like, okay, if that character is a parallel to this character in the real world, then that character is a parallel to that character in the real world. And that character is responsible for a big part of the conspiracy. And we had some conspiracy nuts going wild for some made-up bullshit in our world when that election hit. And that was a bunch of shit. So the show kind of doing a conspiracy thing again, and then putting like an allegory for that character in that. It felt a bit mishandled. Like, maybe should have used, I don't know, a different character here with a different background. I don't know. But maybe that's also reading too much into that from my end. It's just like, because just that part of the show was so close to our real world stuff that happened in the US election. It's like, okay, maybe, I don't know. maybe workshop that a bit more before you put it in a show. Yeah, maybe it doesn't feel thought out.
Maybe have a think on that.
Yeah. But again, those are all small hiccups in the show. That's just like, there's another small one in there. Like I said, overall the show handles the subject matter of racism and how it can or cannot be overcome, and how it's part of everyday society and everything fairly well. But there's some little bits like Tilana condoning casual racism when she says, my colleagues make fun of where I'm from, but I know they don't mean harm. Where it's like, yeah, but that's still not a good thing. That you shouldn't accept that as the status quo and that it should stay that way. I know the show is trying to say, hey, if she spends enough time with them, they will probably stop doing that. And that might be true. But it doesn't take a definitive stand on that being a bad thing. Because, you know, the character we are supposed to relate to, who is being subjected to racism, is saying, I don't like this, but I know they don't mean in a bad way, and so it's okay. And I'm like, no, it's
It's one of
not.
those things where you just look at it and say, "Are you sure about that? Is that really
Yeah,
how
you
you
should.
feel?"
Yeah, because no, it's not okay.
Because going through
And if it's okay for you, it might not be okay for other people from your country. So maybe don't condone that so easily, and don't let those people get away with that. You don't have to be super aggressive about it and confront them, but maybe confront them in a way that maybe can convince them of your point of view, and not just let it fucking slide and and not mentioning it at all. That's also not how you solve that shit and get that shit out of the way. So it's like, okay, one of the characters, like by the end, just fucking apologizes to her, which was very nice.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's nice that the show like ends on such an optimistic like note. Again, maybe a bit too optimistic, because sometimes that might not work, but it's like, hey, okay, there are good guys on this side of the fence too, and sometimes they just need a little nudge because they're maybe too afraid to get out of their comfort zone and escape the, I don't know, societal pressure of certain societal circles that they are trapped in. And if they're actually confronted with a person that is able to pull them out of that, they might say, okay, I'm sorry, I was a dickhead, I was an idiot, and I would rather would overcome my my prejudices and be friends with you, or get to know you, or whatever. So that's nice. That's a nice sentiment. That's like, yeah, that's that's how it should be. That's great. Like, fucking try to see beyond your fucking fences, people. So it's nice that the show just went there. Overall, you said this before, like, hey, there is political stuff in this kind of media, even if you don't see it at first. Like, there's stuff, if you just want to stay with anime, there's stuff in Full Metal Alchemist, there's stuff in Concrete Revolution, there's stuff in Black Lagoon, where certain politics are brought up and discussed, and not every show might make it as apparent and obvious, like in terms of, hey, these are analogies for political stuff. And I just realized I used allegories instead of analogies all the time before. I don't know what's more appropriate here, but okay. So yeah, just because not every show makes its political analogies as obvious as Copcraft and Carol and Tuesday do, because they're really on the nose with that. It doesn't automatically mean that they are not in other shows.
Yeah.
So, always keep a lookout for that. Like I said, it's definitely there. So, and I always appreciate that. I also appreciate, even when I don't agree with that stuff, I'm coming away from the show, it's like, that's a weird stance to take. That's a weird, and maybe even problematic and worrying stance to take, which has happened with certain shows. Like, what's a good example? Gate, that one weird isekai thing where basically the fucking Japanese army invades the fucking isekai world with a bunch of tanks, which is like super fucking military propaganda bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, that's also political.
I mean, there was another show called Outbreak Company that was kind of the same thing, but as opposed to a military takeover, it was like a cultural takeover, and it was kind of like,
right? But still, it's always interesting to see stuff like that actually get discussed in shows and brought up. Yeah, you could still say, hey, no, this is bullshit. It's like, that's a really bad show. That's a really bad thing to put in your show, but still, it's interesting. It's interesting to see it. And if it's handled with a bit of care and has an actual valid and important message to convey, like Copcraft kind of does, surprisingly, that's a good thing. And please, do more of this. Like, especially when it surprised me with shows I did not expect that kind of stuff from, which Copcraft definitely was one of those shows. So it's like, okay, first episode I was like, that's cool. It's like this nice. This is I understand what this show is gonna be. It's like this nice callback to a bunch of body cop stuff. I guess Shoji Gato was a big fan of that. Okay, and this is love letter to that. I'm totally in the mood for that. And then like very quickly the show's like, no, actually this is about racism. this is Will Smith's Bride only in good. And yeah, or at least decent. I don't know. Some people might disagree, may say, yeah, this is too ham-fisted, and the show makes it too easy on itself when it comes to solving all that shit. But I don't know. I don't know if I would agree. I mean, it maybe is too optimistic in certain parts, and maybe doesn't go far enough in other parts on taking the definitive stance for or against certain things. But I think it could have been handled a lot worse. And considering that I did not expect it to have that at all and discuss it that as much as it did, I really like where the show went with this, John. What did you overall feel like? Did you feel like the show had enough substance to it?
Yeah, I mean, the story and the discussion it was attempting to have, and did decently well. It had some legs to it. So I feel like this show, it's on the surface, it's an enjoyable, fun show for what it is. But when you sort of start to read between the lines, I do think it could create a conversation. Where that conversation goes, I don't know, but there's still conversation to still be had about the subject matter of the show and its real world parallels. So I guess you could say the same about Carol and Tuesday as well. So
yeah, definitely. And the same, like I said, as the same with Carol and Tuesday, the sentiment at the very end of the show might be a bit too optimistic compared to what the real world is like, but it's a nice message to go out on and something to strive towards in the real world. So yeah, I like this show. It's not super great, like it's not the best thing ever or something like that, but I definitely enjoyed it. I got more out of it than I expected, which, okay, given wasn't much, but I definitely got more than I expected. So yeah, that's cool. If you want to watch it, it's streaming on Hulu and Funimation in the US and on Anime On Demand in Germany. And yeah, if you are in the mood for what is kind of a love letter to body cop movie cliches and tropes, this will be up your alley. If not, I don't know if you will like everything the show is doing, because you have to let it get away with some stuff that might rub you the wrong way, or that feels like dated. It's not super deep, and the animation production is definitely spotty, but the writing is good. The characters are a lot of fun, and the message feels very relevant, even if not all of it is handled perfectly. But hey, like I said, I didn't expect a show like that to get so involved with current politics, and especially not handling that topic as decently as it did. So overall, this show was definitely a nice surprise. Not a must-see, but you can also do a lot worse, especially when it comes to light novel adaptations. So yeah, I recommend you check it out if it sounds like it might be your cup of tea. And I think John agrees.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Okay, so yeah, and then that's it for us from Anime Brain Freeze for the year of 2019. But we still have one episode left for the season, so we will see you back in January to wrap up with our final review, the chop and drop, and best of the season. Until then, stay frosty, and happy holidays to all of you.
Stay frosty, more like stay warm, everybody.
And that is a wrap on the 86th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and more. Leave us comments and questions on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in, we hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut!
See you next time, everybody. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A tale of tragedy, loss, compassion,
and true family bonds that will best any sword.